Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation, back with another post-race podcast. Today's guest, Scott Liston, a longtime athlete, longtime member of the team, graciously agreed to join us after his most recent marathon. So great to have you here, Scott. How you doing?
Thanks, Patrick. Doing really well.
Awesome. Look at you. I see you've been training the brain there behind you with all those books.
Exactly. I have two things I love to do: triathlon and reading.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you're not multitasking. That could I could see that being a little dangerous unless you're on the trainer. That could be tough.
No, don't do it.
Outstanding. I think that's actually a great sort of introduction to your personality and something that I like to talk a lot about, which is intersectionality, which is we're triathletes, but we're also other people. And
Right.
the intellectual side of training and racing is actually really important for Endurance Nation. We always talk about smarter is faster, and we want people to bring all of their brain cells to training and racing. Sometimes training and racing can reduce possibly the amount of brain cells we have, but we have to show up with the maximum number to get started. So tell us a little bit about your journey. So for the new listeners, how you got into endurance sports and, where you are today, all the steps you've taken until today.
Sure. Yeah. I'll start with the fact that I subscribed to Triathlete magazine in the late 80s, if you can believe that.
Oh, look at that.
And those were the days when they would publish the pros training plans, and I would cut them out and paste them in a little book, if you can believe that. So I was interested in the fact that triathlon was actually a thing, and it was something you could train for, but life certainly got in the way, as I did career and family and all that, and really didn't jump into the sport until early 2000. So 2003 was my first season. So yes, I am a 20-year triathlete.
Hard to believe, right?
It is hard to believe. And what a blessing that the body still works, right? Aren't we blessed to have the health to do this? It's crazy.
100%, like the odds, right? Especially when I hang out with other people. I just had one of my local friends here just had a little book club, which is really just hanging out. And if you smoke cigars, I do not. If you drink, I did not. But I sat around a fire and we talked. And I'm just looking at all of my peers, and I'm like, man, I'm so fortunate. We all have our own like indulgences. For me, it's exercise. But to your point, like when I talk about running or doing something, pretty much everyone else's response is like, how? Not like why, but how? Like, how do you run? How do you ride for an hour? It's just not even computing. And I'm just so grateful that's in my DNA for sure.
Yeah. So I was in my dentist chair on Monday, and he just peppers me with questions. It's half Ironman. How much swimming is that? And what's the bike? And the run is a half marathon. And then he just looks at me like, how can you do that? I said, it's just 6 hours of good, clean fun. He said, you're crazy.
Totally. Well, I've thought about this for a while now, and here's totally unrelated to our episode. I just told you I would see shiny red object and go left. Here I am, dynamiting the episode in the first. Where are we at here?
So much for 30 minutes, Patrick.
Exactly. Dynamite, sub 4-minute dynamite for the podcast. I really think that when you break it down like that, so people want to say that, right? If you say, hey, how much swimming, how much biking, how much running, that's like looking at a car, which maybe it's a new car, right? Maybe you're all about a new car. You're like lusting after this car. If someone says like, why is this car awesome? You don't just say it's got 4 wheels, it's got 4 hubcaps, there's a steering wheel, it's got a mirror, there's a rear view mirror, but still smaller than most rear view mirrors. Trunk space is pretty good. And we don't talk about those things. We have an emotional connection to it. So when people ask me about endurance sports, I've decided now my new action step forward is to be like, don't let me explain it to you because it's unique. Just go find the shortest possible event that you can think you can do. Right. So if it's a 5K, if it's a sprint triathlon, if you've got some gear or something like that, if it's like a local like Fondo that has like or a Century ride that has like a 20-mile ride, anybody can do 20 miles on even a hybrid bike. Just tell them to do it. Do that, and then we can talk. Because once you've experienced it, the parts don't matter. Because now you've got it in your system. Now it's all good.
Yeah.
So the test drive.
Absolutely. I tell folks, I said, when I got into sport, I had swum for 1 year in high school. I had run cross country for 1 year in high school, and I owned a bike. So I was ready.
Sold. Right? Exactly. Yeah, I think people mess that part up.
Yeah. Hopefully every region still has a local race director running sprint and Olympic Triathlon. We're blessed. Actually, Shannon Kurek, who did the local stuff in Ohio, he sold his business and he's out, but there's Zoom Multisport now. And I just think this is a plug for our sport. Triathlon is so accessible. When you go to a local race director's triathlon, people of all shapes and sizes, all abilities, you see all kinds of bikes, and it's tremendous, right? It's just, it's more accessible than doing a group ride with the local roadies.
I love it. I think that's actually a good point. Don't even do the sprint triathlon. Just find the sprint triathlon, get up early, set your clock, get your favorite coffee from your favorite coffee place, and just go watch it. Because you'll look at this and be like, he can do it, she can do this, I can do this. There's a kid doing it. There's a person who's disabled who just went by me doing this event. If it's all shapes, all sizes, all people, all motivations here in the morning on a Saturday or Sunday, just being awesome in motion, like it's hard not to get inspired by that for sure. I love that. Okay, so let's zoom back out again. We're not here to talk about triathlon and try and upsell everybody who's watching this video, which obviously will totally go viral and change the planet. But we're here because you did a marathon, and not just any old marathon. Like you had some goals for this marathon, but more importantly, for me, this marathon was part of a comeback journey for you after a fairly decent injury last year. Would love to kind of hear a little bit of high level stuff on the race, and then we'll play around with the time slider, go back and forward if that's okay.
Yeah, just quickly to what you're referencing is I had a little bike crash October 8th at the end of a charity ride. My competitive side got the best of me, and we were on a multi-use trail, and it was time to get off. And I basically crashed into a concrete wall. So broke my collarbone, my scapula, and 3 ribs. Ouch. Didn't fall off the bike, didn't concuss, but owie. Yeah, and then I'll just jump to rehab was fine. I did our Thanksgiving Day race with my daughter and son-in-law.
With the fam, yeah.
I think I had run like 2 times before that, and that was fun. And that was the beginning. Deb, my wife, and I had walked a ton during the 6 weeks of rehab. And I jumped into a pretty serious half marathon plan also the year before. And I was concerned about the vibration coming through the bike, even on the Wahoo kicker and Zwift, right? Because you're holding on and all that. So I said, let's make this a time of focusing on the run. Okay. So what I had to give up was the out season, obviously. But reached out to you, and your first question was, are you sure the body's going to be able to do the work? And as usual, I was positive, hopeful, and it turned out that was how it worked. So we created a 16-week plan that began January 1st. And let's see, I turned 60 in July, and woohoo! And so I do have a lot of wear and tear on the body, and we set a volume cap, 5.5 hours of running per week. But that's not really at my speed going to get me to 40, 45, 50 miles a week. So we came up with the plan to do bicycling to fill in the gap, right?
That's right.
To get me to the 40-mile equivalent, looking at the kJs I generate on the bike. So I followed that religious. I'm also a power athlete, so a stride athlete. So I'll mention those metrics. But it's just the relative difference. When I started in January, I could sustain my long runs really in like 185 watts. And that was 11-minute miles. And my goal was to get to 9.5. I wanted to see if I could get to a 9.5 target for the marathon. As I like to do, I plotted that thing out every week. And am I improving?
Very familiar.
Every week, right? Am I increasing the volume? How do the tempo runs look? How do the easy runs look? How does the long run look? Plotted kind of all of them, and it was just a gradual increase. And one of the things about me and why I got it's like my numbers tricked me into going after this marathon, Patrick, and here's how.
Oh, tell me.
We all have these watches, right?
Yeah.
And then I also have Stride, and it talks to me, Patrick. It says, Scott, you can do a 3:40 marathon. Scott, don't you realize that was Stride? Garmin was like, oh no, you're a 410 man. But I'm like, those aren't
Okay.
that far apart. And then those numbers kept falling, right? Every week.
Right. It's getting better.
Pretty soon. Yeah. You think you're amazing. You're out of this world. And it's funny because I believed the hype. And the reality is that when you look at my 5K, 10K, 15K, I do that work at a BQ rate, Boston qualifying rate, probably a minute or two away at the half. But as we unpack the marathon, we'll see I was an hour away.
Yes.
So that's pretty interesting. And maybe that's not unusual for members of the team and other triathlon marathoners. And it's all about what happens after 3 hours.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay. So I have to say, I love first of all, thanks for telling us about the journey. And I think almost every race podcast that I've done, like hands down, every athlete, every endurance athlete, someone who's been doing this for more than 1 year, has a comeback story. So I just want to dispel the myth that triathletes or endurance athletes are like always healthy and always crushing and like our spirits are, but our bodies go through cycles, ups and downs. And it doesn't mean that we're prevented from doing what we love. It just means we have to change our approach. And I think that's one of the biggest myths out there. People get injured. They're like, that's it. I'm packing it in, selling all the stuff. I'm like, no, it's 8 weeks. Like you can do it. You just trained for an Ironman for 16 weeks. I think you can hang on for 8 weeks. So I'm really pleased that you shared the journey. And also how you highlighted how we collaborated and came up with a plan that was kept you in a space where you felt safe, but also allowed you to continue to explore fitness, even though part of you was offline and recovering. That's my favorite part about being a multi-sport athlete, is that we have flexibility in terms of what we do. Right? If you only do one thing, like if you only like to run up mountains and you have a running injury, you can't run up mountains. And so that's running up mountains is epic, and the drone footage is fantastic, but it's really singular and it really does limit you. And so having the different aspects to your fitness is so important. So I'm glad that we explored that and got you there. And I just want to come back to, because we'll probably click in on this, is the voices. We need to do a video of the Stride voice and the Garmin voice. Honestly, I already inherently don't like the Garmin voice because it also tells me like, hey, it's time to get up and move. And I'm like, I just worked out for 2 hours. Like I'm exhausted. Who wrote that algorithm that triggers that? Like clearly whoever wrote the algorithm for movement is not talking to the person who wrote the algorithm for capturing the exercise data, because those two pieces are not talking to each other. Anyway, yeah, the data is hard. And even the Stride side, which is that team is always like iterating and trying to make their race predicting tool better. But there's a lot of nuances to the information that we have there. You know, I feel like and we see it almost in every aspect of our lives now, that data is permutated so many areas. When I go log in and look at my portfolio online, they've got like where I am now, and then it's got this dotted line that tells me like, hey, and you'll be here. And I know that's not how things work. It's tempting to say that I will be here in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But I know that's not how that works. The challenge becomes like an athlete where we are, where we're not only optimistic, but we're hardworking and we believe in ourselves. And we're like, maybe that could work. Like maybe, yeah,
exactly.
I think we could do that. And that's the rub. Yeah. That's the rub.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had an ambitious goal for your marathon. Let's go through the race itself and just unpack that.
Yeah, sure. This was the Glass City Marathon in Toledo, Ohio. So super flat. I'd last done the Flying Pig in 2019, and it's very hilly.
You glad you didn't do it this year? Do you see those videos online?
Oh, it was crazy. Yeah, it was so rainy.
Like a monsoon.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I was happy, and I overtly chose Toledo so that I could get a flat course, because I've suffered with quad cramps, especially on the downhills. So I said, you know what? I want to take that out of the equation. The interesting punchline is that my performance for Flying Pig and Toledo were very similar. In the end, right? The overall. With Flying Pig, it was stop and workout cramps, and I didn't have to do that in Toledo, but still the overall result was similar. We had a mixture of weather. It was probably 35 degrees at the start, partly cloudy, and then over the course of the day, got sunny, probably mile 12 through 16, clouded back up again. And as I was finishing it, believe it or not, Patrick, it began to hail a little bit, and the wind started kicking up. And the people finishing like the half an hour after me, it was wind and hail. Yeah, you can't get away from weather.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of everything. I went from right? Taking my arm warmers up for that mile 12 through 16. It's like sunny, it's going to get warmer. Then you're like, oh, it's really clouding up again. And oh my, put the arm warmers back on. And then the wind kicked up. And so it was a little bit crazy, but the weather's the same for everybody, right? No worries. But
still,
yeah.
So you want to go back to, hey, stride guy, heads up, hail. Did you plan on that? No, you didn't, did you? Huh? Thanks, stride guy.
Put that in your algorithm.
Exactly. Take that.
So let's see.
Okay.
So yeah, nothing for the weekend itself, nothing eventful, and had a good dinner and a good night's sleep before, and then got to the race venue. I actually got up and did a little shuffle, like a mile and a half, just right outside my Airbnb first thing.
Okay.
And then came back in and had breakfast and took care of bathroom needs and all that.
Okay.
And Deb took me to the start, and I had a chance to stay warm until the very end, take my stuff off and throw it in the race bag, and didn't really have too many minutes before the start. So I feel like I was able to stay warm because it was 35 degrees, which is important to warm as long as you can. Yeah. And then the gun goes off, and here we go. And my splits, Patrick, were just so consistent from start to mile 16. Really. So it's like 225, 229 watts and 9.5 minute miles, plus or minus 5 or 10 seconds. And the course is a combination of being on the road and being on some trails, some multi-use trails. It's fun. If anybody wants to do this race, it's a good one. But I was clicking along. I think I stopped for a bathroom break about 12. I was taking in goo that I had in a pack in front about every 4 miles. And then I took their Gatorade at every aid station. So probably 4 ounces or so. That got me to the 250 calories an hour or so, plus or minus. And so I felt good about nutrition. And I don't know, I think it's just classic. The combination of 3 hours was the longest I did. I will mention that my race rehearsal was run for about an hour and then do a half marathon race, which was pretty cool. It was the Xenia half marathon. Yeah, sorry. The Xenia half marathon on April 2nd. So that was good. And I went back and looked at my race rehearsal and the first 16 miles of my marathon. Guess what? Identical.
Really?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. 9.5 minute miles.
Okay.
Just clicking along. But after 16, I started to see the fade begin, 15, 20 seconds a mile, 30 seconds a mile, 40 seconds a mile. And what's funny, a lot of people who've done marathons have had this experience. It's the pacer groups, right? Oh, there go the 410 guys. Okay, that was my goal. There goes the 420 group. I'll hang with them for a little while, right? And then you're like, what is it? I can't do it. And so forth. It's fine, but I just kept slowing down until it was probably after another bathroom stop at 20 that I had to walk a little. And Garmin tells no lies. I walked about 11 minutes in total. But my strategy was just to kind of walk, get my heart rate down until I felt like I could start running again. So it was more like walk, run for a time. And so I don't feel like I had any thoughts or self-defeating or anything like that. It just felt like the muscular endurance wasn't there. And this is where I'll pause and say one of the things that I did in preparation was to consistently do strength training a couple times a week.
Wall sits. Yeah.
And so I had a couple regimens that I would do in the basement. And the wall sits was after my long run. I worked my way up to 20, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. But where I felt the muscular endurance hit me was probably hip flexors and just not being able to activate the glutes and just not having the pickup, right? In getting my heel up behind me. And so if anything, I think for the future, I'm going to continue to do the wall sits for the quads,
Love it.
Continue to work on hip flexors, continue to work on glutes with single leg squats, with bridges, things like that. Because I think especially as an older athlete, getting some strength training in just to continue to build muscular endurance is important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say here, hold on a second. Let me see if I can share my screen. Sharing. All right, here we are. We're looking at your Strava data here from the race itself that I just pulled up. And was something I like noticed right away was you highlighted, I'm looking at it, but I gotta be on it. You mentioned like 11 at 12-ish. Looks like you actually were still on pace even through 14. Maybe a little bit slower, but you held together. But interestingly enough to note here that like the heart rate starts to go up starting at mile 9.25, 3/4, like etc. and stays elevated. So you were chilling along here, the mid 130s, like happy you, low 130s, mid 130s.
Right.
And then right around 9, it starts to pick up. And then we get to this next level where you peaked at 142. Yeah, 143 even around mile 15 and a half. And that's where it was like, oh, we start to see the decoupling happen here, right? The pace starts to go up and the heart rate starts to go down, right? And by up, slowing down. We see that difference there. Interesting that this is also the time when we start to see it's a function of you kind of slowing a bit as you'll be hotter as you're a little bit slower. But this is interesting here to see that the temperature in that time frame, according to your data, went from 52 up to 68
Absolutely.
in a very short time frame. That really started to accelerate that for you. Was that something you were aware of at the time? Like you talked about all the elements, but
yeah, I was aware. Yeah, the sun came out and I had hat, gloves, arm warmers, and all came off.
Okay.
And I put a headband on. So yeah, I was pretty aware that it was getting warmer and that my heart rate was going up a little bit. But in training, that was natural. I think it's pretty natural when you maintain pace, your heart rate's going to go up and you expect that.
Right.
Yeah. The decoupling is right where I said maybe 14 to 16. And then look at after that. After the second bathroom break.
Yeah.
Totally. But
that's where things get tough.
That's at 20, right? Where it gets hard for everyone.
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. We'll drop that map right in there on 20 and just look at it. The time graph is different because this part took longer relative to the time aspect of it. Yeah. So you definitely felt it like this. To me, that's interesting. I'm just something to think about for you just from a data perspective. I'll stop sharing the screen so we can look at each other.
No, it's fine. You saw the walk run part too.
Yes, I did. I did. Hey, you got to pull out all the strategy. You got to pull out all the strategies. So something to think about too is, like you mentioned, the heat. One of the challenges of the earlier parts of the season racing is just not being prepared for that. And by that, I don't mean strategy wise. I also mean we just haven't run in a good amount of heat for our body to be like, this is all the stuff that I do in the heat. I think there's an intellectual adaptation to heat, and tomorrow I need to prepare. And then also just physiological, after a couple of weeks, you're fine. Just the first day of winter is the coldest day of your life, but in 2 weeks, it's fine. Not a problem at all. You're like, I'm totally fine. But that adaptation does require some time. So that's a hard one to look at. The other side is trying to like maybe going back and take a look at some of your longer runs just to see where your heart rate sweet spot is. I'd be curious to know if it's a cardiovascular piece, right? Where it's like, ooh, hey, this is that one sort of 133 to 138 is my marathon happy place. And maybe the goal becomes doing some of those longer runs in the future, next event, saying, hey, I'm going to keep in my happy place for as best I can for 16 or 18 miles. And then I'm going to come out of that happy place or allow myself to and continue to push so we can see what the time to finish is for you to be able to sustain and then start to work that backwards, right? Do we make you more efficient, right? In terms of running, that's something you can work on a treadmill with a heart rate monitor and check your run form. Obviously, temperature wise, obviously you've got to take a warm vacation now before you do Glass City again. You got to go somewhere nice for at least a week, run around, but make some of those decisions related to that, because at the end of the day, when we have a fitness, you talked about the data. I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. So we have like goals and aspirations based off of numbers that we're imbuing with a lot of confidence. And we're saying to our body, you can do this. Unless you were like, you have this agreement with your brain, but it's not really talking to your quads or your glutes or your hamstrings to be like, hey, come on, everybody. Your brain's, oh, totally, we got this. And so the body comes back with the heart rate. So you're going off the power numbers, the body comes back with the heart rate. And I think there's a valuable intersection there. And the reason why I bring it up is just to say that there's an amount of time we can spend at a certain heart rate that changes as we age, changes by sport, changes by conditions. As we get better at managing that, we can do more. So in your case, it could be very well be that if you'd actually moved that race earlier, if you'd said, hey, I'm going to do early April race or a late March race, going to roll the dice on the weather a bit, but because of the cooler temperatures, it's going to be really hard to get my heart rate into the 140. Like, what the hell's going to get me up there, right? So use the conditions to create a suppression of that escalated heart rate to give you more bandwidth, right? As a bigger person, I often do much better in cooler environments. And I don't have a lot of efficiency options. I'm just big. I am not efficient. So trying to figure out some ways to be, as we take some of these lessons away, not just, hey, first race back after some time off and things you need to work on. I would also take some of those strategic pieces away too. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. So it's disappointing, obviously, but you did it. You finished, which is awesome. That's a huge step back. And I find that those sometimes races like this are actually even more rewarding. You got to go for it. You got to give it your best shot and be like, okay, this is where it landed. Okay. What's next? And I think you have that growth mindset as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So what's on the agenda? As you're recovering now, it's been a couple of weeks. What are you looking forward to for the rest of this year?
In a week, I've got a century ride in beautiful Georgetown, Kentucky.
A very safe century ride. No racing.
No racing. So it is affectionately called the Horsey 100, Patrick.
So, please tell me you don't go on a track of some kind to get the finish. Okay.
So it's in the beautiful horse country, right around Lexington, Kentucky. And
all right.
So very hilly, very picturesque, and so it should be great. And I've been, since Glass City, I've been working on my staying balanced, but working on my bike and making sure I get good bike volume in. So I think I'll be ready, and it'll be. And then after that, I have a revenge race. So I'm going to do 70.3 Ohio.
Aha.
The quick Ohio story last year, swim, bike were great. Run was great for about 4 miles, and then just no energy. And the long story short is I was actually sick. I found out 2 days after that I had the 3 fever. Yeah. So it would be great to do that race not sick, Patrick.
Let's do that for sure. And you have to actually beat the race this time, because otherwise I think Ohio in your household may actually have to become a 4-letter word, because you may need to just either relocate or start racing in just neighboring states at some point, because it's out to get you.
Yep, it's out to get me.
Okay.
So and then you and I have something in common. We're age up buddies, because I'm going to be the youngest in my age group. Good things might happen. So
I love that.
See whether a podium is in my future for Ohio.
Okay.
And then after that, I've been vacillating, but I think I'm going to do the 70.3 in Michigan. So Frankfort, Michigan. They've only run that a couple times, but it's close and accessible. And so I think that's the next thing for me. And that's in September.
Okay. We got time. All right.
Yep. Yeah.
Good. That's fantastic. I mean, thanks so much for sharing the race story and your journey to it with most of our teammates. It's never a dull moment, but I just want to give a shout out to your focus, ability to come back, ability to be undaunted. Most people, maybe you did it privately, but most people have a couple-day period of public grieving where they're just so upset with themselves and so upset with the world and so upset with everything. And you just skip that part and go right to okay, what do we do now? And I think people say, what is the popular phrase now? It's like a goldfish. Be a goldfish. That's what they say on Ted Lasso. Be a goldfish. Just focus on right now. Oh, food. I'm going to eat it. Not didn't have food yesterday or lost something or new fish tank. I think there's skill in that. And it's part of the wisdom that you bring to your racing experience is not just high levels of ambition and relentless positivity. So it's a bright light inside the team. And we're super grateful for it. Not calling out anybody who's depressed all the time in the depressed channel. We don't have that, but we all do struggle. And so I just want to say that we appreciate you. Give you a shout out. So
yeah, that's great, Patrick. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the team. That's the fun about being on the team is just watching others' experiences, getting to encourage them, getting the encouragement from them. So it's been a joy. And
oh my goodness.
yeah, thanks, sir.
Just even this last weekend, we had Akshay do his first Olympic triathlon, his first triathlon, his Olympic ever. And then we have Jonathan, who like you came back from a bike crash and did his like whatever 70.3. We're all on the same call. I'm like, it's like awesome, like first timer and like really experienced age grouper coming together. Like you just, yeah, pretty special place to be for sure. So
it's a great place to be. Love it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for your time. This will probably come out like end of May. We're talking here on May 18th based on the scheduling. So I'm trying to do some more of these, but I'll give you a heads up and let you know. All right.
Great, Patrick. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Same. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing your revenge race plans and maybe a picture or two of you happily standing properly at the end of this horsey hilly 100. Okay.
Exactly. No crashes.
No crashes. Shiny side up, brother. All right. Take care. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Patrick.
Scott. See ya. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.